this video, and if you can, by a show of hands, let us know if you've seen this video. Put a 1 in the chat. If you haven't seen this video and you've never heard of the story, put a 2, because I really feel like the media and YouTube are censoring this story. They don't want it to get out there. And again, as Ed said, you know, nobody should have to lose their life at the hands of people who are there to protect them. Corrections officers across this nation, the men and women who work behind the wall, I would say a very, very high percentage of them do the right thing. And here, in this instance, we see the exact opposite. We see 14 or more personnel of civilian rank and rank in the corrections field do nothing. They saw something that went wrong and they did nothing. As a matter of fact, and correct me if I'm wrong, folks in the chat, it seemed by watching this video, this was standard operating procedure. It wasn't their first rodeo. This seemed like they've done this before, and nobody even was like, what's going on here? No sergeant. There was 2 of them there. Nobody grabbed somebody and said, hey, take it easy. Stop.
Yeah, no one stepped in to de-escalate. No one said, hey, what are you doing? Stop this. This isn't right. Nobody.
Right. Let's play this little clip. This is from Friday, December 27th. This incident took place December 9th, 2024 at 9:21 p.m. Robert Brooks, 43 years old, was pronounced dead at 4 a.m. the next day, Tuesday morning, December 10th. That was a Tuesday. The incident of the assault happened at 9:21 p.m. Eastern time. And again, some of this stuff is sensitive. So if you are sensitive to this type of stuff, you have PTSD, I suggest you step out just for the next 3 minutes.
Breaking news at Weather Authority. This is 13 Land News at 5.
Breaking news on the expanding investigation into the death of a prison inmate from Rochester, whom authorities say was brutally beaten by corrections officers. Video released today.
These videos are shocking and disturbing, and I advise all to take appropriate care before choosing to watch them.
Outrage boiling over the death of Rochester native Robert Brooks, whom authorities say fell victim to a senseless and savage attack at the hands of corrections officers behind prison walls.
As Attorney General, you have my word that we will use every possible tool available to us to investigate this death thoroughly and swiftly.
Tonight, a comprehensive look at the case and the reaction running high. And we want to warn you, the video released today is violent. And while the exact cause of Robert Brooks' death has yet to be revealed, his family wants justice. Good afternoon. I'm Matt Malloy. Karen is off. The New York State Attorney General today releasing 8 body camera videos from inside the MARCY Correctional Facility. The videos giving rise to more and more questions about exactly what happened in that prison before Robert Brooks died. 13 Web's Christian Garzone with reaction from Brooks's family attorney and the comments by Attorney General Letitia James. Christian, good evening.
Good evening. This investigation is still ongoing. We don't know why Brooks was transferred from the Mohawk facility to the MARCY facility. A lawyer said right now the Brooks family only wants answers. A warning, the video you're about to see is graphic. State Attorney General Letitia James releasing body-worn camera videos from the December 9th incident involved.
I just want to say one thing to the audience. I chose to show you this one. A lot of it is blurred out because it is, and there's some of it that's not, but most of this is blurred out because it shows someone getting their life beaten out of them. And that's basically, in a nutshell, what you're going to see here.
Robert Brooks of Rochester, who died on December 10th after an encounter with New York State Department of Corrections and Community Supervision officers at MARCY Correctional Facility in MARCY, Oneida County. On December 9th, Mr. Brooks was transferred from Mohawk Correctional Facility to MARCY Correctional Facility, both in Oneida County. Mr. Brooks, who was handcuffed with his hands behind his back, was then taken to a medical examination room where the events captured in this video took place. His face originally appears unscathed in the body-worn camera video, later bloodied and swollen. The videos released Friday show corrections officers either taking turns punching and kicking Brooks Brooks or just standing idly by, watching. He was later taken to a nearby hospital where he died the next day on December 10th.
These videos are shocking and disturbing, and I advise all to take appropriate care before choosing to watch them.
The lawyer for the Brooks family, Elizabeth Mazur, is saying watching these videos with the family was incredibly painful.
I just can't even imagine what it was like for them to see their brother, their son, their father's final breaths on this earth.
Mazur is saying Brooks was completely defenseless. The action and inaction of some of the officers was troubling.
This is like not a rage fuel event. It seems just like everyday business, which just is very upsetting.
Mazur says she and the family are not sure the details surrounding this beating.
This is so incomprehensible. You know, how could this happen?
Mazur says the family right now is only asking for answers.
It's hard to even know what needs to happen until we get to the bottom of how it could be that this occurred.
The State Department of Corrections Commissioner Daniel Marticello saying the video left him repulsed and nauseated, and this behavior cannot be normalized, calling it clearly a, quote, killing. He said action is being taken, including the termination process for those involved, resulting in 13 staff now suspended without pay and 1 employee resigning. The union that represents the correctional officers previously said, in part, in statement, what happened to Mr. Brooks is the opposite of what they stand for. The incident only endangers their entire membership and undermines the integrity of their profession, adding, we cannot condone this behavior. In a release to the media, the Attorney General said in part, the release of this footage is not an expression of any guilt or innocence. No one has been charged. The investigation is ongoing.
All right, I want to stop it there because we have 2 of our corrections professionals. And again, the statements, Ed, from the corrections commissioner is the proper ones. I think everybody that's working on that shift and everybody for that matter that works in that facility should be looked at and either transferred or reviewed. Because if this is going on a 9 p.m. Monday evening, regular shift, 9 p.m. shift, 4 to 12, I would have to say, if this is going on in there and this is standard operating procedure, everybody should get looked at.
Yeah, this is just scratching the surface here. I mean, with all the supervisors that were present and nobody doing anything to stop this, this isn't the first time this has happened. And every one of these individuals should be investigated and see if there's any connection to any other previous attacks that they may have committed on their prisoners.
Yeah. Our guest, Anthony Ganji from Tier Talk, he's a corrections professional. He talks on this. He actually did a video on this. I have his channel linked in the description. And John Perugini, I know I might have just mauled his name. He's going to correct me when he comes on. John is a corrections professional, 21, 22 years on the job in New York City. Anthony, John, thank you so much for joining. And this is a very, very troubling situation. Anthony, I'll go to you first because you have the executive, position. Some, insight for the audience would be tremendous here.
Yeah, so obviously the videos come out quicker now because there's always going to be a push for transparency. Usually something like this, you wouldn't see the video till months or even years later, but there is now a push for transparency. So obviously videos of use of force footages are getting pushed out to the public a lot quicker. But again, when I put this video out there, I didn't even bother to do a video breakdown because this does not represent what the profession's about. It doesn't represent us as individuals. It doesn't represent the trust that the public provides us. So, I mean, there's no excuse for what's seen on that video. So I just felt, thank God we're covering a different avenue here, but I felt like reviewing the video and doing a breakdown, it's so obvious what these individuals did was wrong that I just didn't want to get myself caught up in trying to provide excuses for something that's just it's just an assault. I mean, it's a criminal assault.
There's no excuse for this behavior. And, I think back to when I watched the video of George Floyd, I got the same vibe, but this was with 14 people. And I'm not going to play the sound, but this is them coming in with him. And it seemed like these are the transport guys, because we see these same guys in the room in the infirmary. It seemed like there was a problem with him on that 3.5 or 3 hour and 45-minute car ride, which is Mohawk Correctional is about 183 miles north of the MARCY Correctional Facility. So they brought him down south towards Albany and brought him from Mohawk, which we don't know why he was transferred, but he was transferred, and it doesn't just happen just to transfer. Your thoughts on that, Anthony?
Yeah, so I want to make a guess here, because I try to reach out to a few people, and I no one seems to know why he was transferred. So in my experience, what I can guess is this, and I'm also looking at the amount of people that are there, especially probably during the drop-off, is I'm assuming he could have assaulted staff at another facility, and then what they did was they organized the immediate transfer of this individual to a more high security facility. So granted, that's something that management will do, because we want to minimize the chance for retaliation. So if you have an inmate that assaults staff, again, I don't know what happened at the prior facility. Let's just say, for example, if you have an inmate that assaults staff, one is anybody that was involved in that incident, including the first responders to that incident, we want to have negative interaction. So basically what we're going to do is we're going to remove anybody that was involved in that initial incident to keep things objective as possible, but to keep things less emotional, and then work on transferring that inmate out of this facility. And everything is going to be camera ran. If you got body cameras on. If not, you got a supervisor or maybe an internal affairs division person coming in to videotape any type of movement with this individual, just to showcase that we handled this in a manner that was professional, so we can carry out what would be justice. And the other thing is, lawyers, when they know that an inmate has assaulted staff, lawyers will call the facility and want to represent that inmate, because they feel that we are going to retaliate. So the best thing that the facility does is to keep things objective as best as possible, is to remove that inmate from the immediate area of where that assault happened, make sure that no one's involved in the transport that was involved in that assault. We even sometimes may call another facility over to do the transport. So it may not be the facility that was involved, unless it's an emergent need, and kind of keep things objective through the process. But with that said, also before this is all about liability here, but before the inmate leaves the facility, we take pictures, because we're going to cover ourselves. Management's going to ask for pictures taken of that inmate, because we want to know what they look like before they left. And when they come in, you're going to take pictures. That receiving facility wants to know who you're giving us, because we know there is that potential for retaliation.
Hey, Anthony, let me just stop it here just for a second. And John, I want to go to you after I talk about this. Apparently, again, we're speculating here, and we don't know why he was transferred. We will find out. That will come out. But it doesn't matter anyways if he was transferred for assaulting another correction officer at a different facility. It doesn't warrant getting beaten to death. And we all can agree about that. But my thing is Robert Brooks was 43 years old. He was serving a 12-year sentence for stabbing his ex-girlfriend, I think 14 times. He was initially charged with attempted murder, and that was back in, I believe, 2016. He got sentenced in 2017 to 12 years for assault first degree. So it got pled down, and he pled to a lesser charge, assault first degree. He was sentenced to 12 years. But it doesn't matter. People are asking in the chat, what was he in there for? He didn't get sentenced to a sentence of being beaten to death. And that's the bottom line here is, okay, he's been in for quite some time now. And I'm just curious of, did he do good time? Did he have problems? It is what it is. But John, I wanted to go to you. Is this standard operating procedure if an inmate has, as Anthony said, an altercation with a corrections officer to transfer within New York State? Do you know about that?
Yes. The state and the city are the same but different in the sense of protocol and procedure. But New York City will. Inmate is in the facility. He has a use of force, whether it's inmate, officer. that person is seen by medical, taken down to the intake area, and is either rehoused in the facility, opposite side of the building kind of thing, or will be immediately taken out of the facility to another facility on Rikers Island or in one of the boroughs to try to, as Anthony said, bring everything down. Yes, you have use of force, whether it's staff related or inmate related. He will be taken to the clinic to receive medical attention. Pictures, obviously, of everybody involved, seen by the medical staff. And then, yes, if they're being shipped out, full, same thing, cuffs, ankles, and then onto the bus and taken to where they're going, where once they are at that other facility, again, same procedure. Medical takes them in. He is visually looked at. They're screened. His housing area will be discussed as far as what his classification could be. So all of that, like I said, New York State and New York City is the same but different, but the protocol pretty much is identical, and those are the proper steps that are taken. Also going with what you said, whether it was a use of force on staff and or inmate, you don't know what happened on that car ride going down south to the next facility.
3 hours and 45 minutes.
Yeah, it could have been, just argumentative, could have been somewhat stating things. I mean, this is all, speculation, obviously. Maybe refusal to get out, maybe regardless of what happened at his facility that he was in, it happens a lot. We used to get it at the barge, where if you had a guy coming from Rikers to the barge or a guy going from the barge to Rikers Island, they used to do what they were going to hold up the bus. They're going to hold it up. A guy won't come out of the cell, and you have to have a response team take him out, put him on the bus, and vice versa. You can have a guy hold the bus up because he may not want to go to that facility because he just left all his people on Rikers Island.
And John,
he's going to hold it up.
What I remember about that incident, what you're referring to here, is in New York City with the corrections, when they would have to take somebody out by force. I've seen this dozens and dozens, maybe hundreds of times, actually. When they would do any type of force, like what we saw in these videos, there would be a team. There would be 1 or 2 people videotaping.
True.
That's interesting. Is for liability. We did not see that in the state correctional. There was no cameras. There was no cameras in the infirmary. There was no cameras that I could see in the hallway. And that's what was troubling. It just seemed like this was standard operating procedure for these 14 goons. None of them seemed to be shaken by this. Nobody was like, hey, wait a minute. There was 2 sergeants there. Nobody stopped anybody. And there was nobody filming. Their body cameras, Ed, we could talk about this all day long. The only reason we captured this is by mistake, because they powered them on, but they didn't press them. So it recorded from 4 different officers, 4 different views of this assault. Ed, any thoughts?
I mean, it's just totally shocking. And, like what really disturbs me is it's an out and out murder. Okay. No justification. No justification. It's a violation of their oath. It's a violation of the law. Once they did this, they stopped being correctional officers and it immediately became criminals. Okay. And those who stood by and did nothing, same thing for you. Okay. You didn't stop them. You are a criminal as well.
There was a male civilian employee that actually smiled and laughed in the hallway. I'm going to play this clip and then go over to Anthony, because I know you got a lot to say, Anthony. Yeah. So let me play this clip real quick. And this is a retired police, I think they put officer, but I think he's a police chief, reacting. A news station up there, I think in Buffalo, asked this police executive to react to this video. This is, again, I'm putting out a disclaimer here. And thank you to everyone who's gifting the memberships, by the way. Thank you for that. Disclaimer, this is going to be some sensitive stuff, because this is not going to be blurred out. This is going to show you some fists being thrown here. So if you suffer PTSD, now's the time to click off and then come back.
That is just wrong. That's a crime being committed.
A retired police chief in disbelief while watching the body camera video released by AG Letitia James. In the video, you can see Robert Brooks being transported at MARCY Correctional Facility on the night of December 9th. The video has no sound as officers never turned on their body cams, a legal requirement according to the retired police chief.
That is dangerous. That is extremely dangerous. You could have spinal injuries. You could have his head hit the number of sharp objects.
See, gentlemen, I'm looking at the hallways here, and I do not see any cameras. Is that normal in a state correction facility?
Wait, so they also have something that's the chief's wrong about something there real quick, though. So prison policy is a little bit different when it comes to body worn cameras and when we have to turn them on. Granted, I don't on transport, whatnot, but we don't have to have the body worn cameras turned on at every moment of the day. You're going to have interactions with inmates. Now, in this case here, if it could turn into a use of force or if it could turn into something that is starting to go negative, then yes, you're going to turn your cameras on and do what you got to do. But this here is the Axon cameras have a video recall function, which means that it's able to recall footage from 4 hours prior, just with no sound. But what governs body-worn cameras in the prison facilities is not going to be the same policy you find on the streets. We're not having staff turn on their cameras for every interaction. But as I said, if by chance the interaction starts to go negative, then yes, you're turning on the camera. No different if you're pulling somebody over on the streets and you turn on your sirens and everything's linked in together. But as for the hospitals or the infirmary, because technically maybe it's an infirmary, you're going to have cameras that are in generalized areas for safety and security reasons, as long as they don't violate HIPAA or oversee procedural things that medical may have to do. Right. But you should have cameras that are in these areas, like intake areas, hallways, even in some rooms, because don't forget, you can flag the footage, which means that even though the footage is recorded, not everybody has access to see that footage. They'll need approval to see the footage, and that would be more so for an investigative matter.
In this instance here, it appears at one point one of the correctional officers covering up the actual body camera. So I don't know if he did it just inadvertently and didn't realize it, but it just seemed at a convenient moment where he actually crossed his arm across his body. But in this case here, this would be a time where body worn cameras would be activated, and nobody, not one of those 14 individuals, and only 4 of them had them, activated it. Let's listen. This guy's retired from up in that area, this chief.
A few minutes later, after being transported inside, Brooks is seen handcuffed with his hands behind his back and taking punches and kicks from a group of correction officers.
There's more blows. This is a crime in progress by the correction officers.
Later, Brooks is seen being choked.
He's trying to choke him.
The guy lifted him up
now
off of the actual table by his neck. There, and that was again a difficult part of this to watch, and there's so much more to it.
And with something else,
is somebody hitting him with like lead gloves?
I think
it was his shoe. They took his shoe off. Ed, what you're seeing is
hitting him with the shoe.
His left shoe. It's a black boot, and he's hitting him with the inmate's own shoe.
He's handcuffed behind, so there's nothing he can do. He looks to be in distress.
And with a bloody face, as his hands continue to be behind his back handcuffed.
Curious as to where the medical staff is. This should be taken over by the medical staff at this point. If I was in command right now, this situation would be stopped. The officers and separated from the inmates, a new crowd of officers and supervisors coming in.
But instead, laughter seen by some witnesses on scene.
This is not funny.
That was the nurse. It said RN, I believe, right there. It says RN on his jacket there. He's laughing. So this, to me, seems like it's standard operating procedure, which is very troubling, because how many other times did this happen and the outcome wasn't death?
Also, I'm also very curious on what the body-worn camera policy is for the facility, because even though that obviously all this stuff's caught on camera, they may not be in violation for not activating their camera. It depends on what the policy of the prison states, because the body-worn cameras in prisons right now are relatively new.
This
So
guy
a lot
right
of-
here in the back is a sergeant. This guy right here is a sergeant. He's wearing a white shirt. You can see the sergeant stripe on his arm. And he's in this room during this whole time. And he's got his back turned towards the inmate. He's got his back turned to him, and he's doing paperwork on the table. And at one point, he's washing his hands. It's troubling.
Just coming in.
But instead, laughter, seen by some witnesses on scene.
This is not funny. We failed to do our job, the job we've been trained in, the job we received training, advanced training for. When you're watching a person die.
Sam is real.
Yeah. So troubling. I mean, John, I know you worked in some really tough areas, and I've come in to the barge when there's a complete shutdown, when inmates are fighting, or if there's some type of something going on. But you see the special, emergency service unit guys, and they're going in a, and I know, Anthony, the same thing over by you, where they're going hands on each other's back down the aisle, and there's a person with a camera in the back and a person with a camera in the front. I don't know if this is done in the state, but apparently here, this looked like a ghost town. It looked like there was nobody else around, and it was these guys and this crew, and they seemed to be very comfortable with each other.
Well, that's the whole thing, and that's what makes it kind of disturbing in this, the comfortableness of it. And again, like you said, I know that a lot of things are similar but different. I don't understand why. Again, who knows what occurred on that ride? But if something occurred, why there was no team meeting them at that gate at the drop-off with a camera, with their response team suited up, or something to escort that body. Because if you're bringing me a body, once you come to my facility, we are the officers that take over. At no time should the officers that, like Anthony said earlier, if you're coming from the facility and that's what the problem was, you have got to relinquish him to me because he's a problem. Okay, relinquish him to me, and then my area, my people will take over, and that's what should have happened, And then exactly what Anthony said about cameras in clinics, in Rikers Island and on the barge, even in Brooklyn House, clinics have it, like you said, in generalized areas because of the HIPAA. You cannot have any cameras that are facing examination areas. So it is a general view. So you may not see them. It's
Ali from New Zealand says, what do they do when the cameras aren't on? We are seeing what they do when the cameras aren't on, because they didn't know, in my opinion, they didn't know that those cameras are on. We got a bird's eye view of what they do or what these individuals do. Listen, and I'm not saying that, I think this is important that we say this. This is not indicative of the overwhelming majority of the men and women who work behind the wall, what they do day in and day out. They risk their lives and they do their jobs right. This is part of the bad apples that need to be, and heads up and kudos to Letitia James, however she was tipped off to this. Let's listen to her statement, and then I'll go to you, Anthony. I know you got a lot to say.
I got a lot.
Good afternoon. Today, my office is releasing video from the investigation into the death of Mr. Robert Brooks. Mr. Brooks had been incarcerated at Mohawk Correctional Facility and was transferred to MARCY Correctional Facility on December 9th. During the incident, he was handcuffed with his hands behind his back. He was pronounced dead at Wynn Hospital in Utica on December 10th. I do not take lightly the release of this video, especially in the middle of the holiday season. But as Attorney General, I release these videos because I have a responsibility and duty to provide the Brooks family, their loved ones, and all New Yorkers with transparency and accountability. My deepest condolences go out to Mr. Brooks's family. Under New York law, my office investigates every case in which an officer of the law, including a correctional officer, may have caused the death of a civilian. On December 16th, my office announced that it had opened an investigation into Mr. Brooks's death. As in every case, the attorneys and investigators in my office are conducting an exhaustive review of the facts and the evidence. As Attorney General, you have my word that we will use every possible tool available to us to investigate this death thoroughly and swiftly. As part of the investigation, my office obtained video from body-worn cameras that 4 of the correction officers were wearing at the time of the incident. The 4 officers had their body-worn cameras powered on, but did not activate them. So their cameras were recording video in standby mode without recording sound. My team met with Mr. Brooks's family earlier this week, and they viewed the footage. These videos are shocking and disturbing, and I advise all to take appropriate care before choosing to watch them. We are releasing 8 videos today from 4 officers' body-worn cameras. 4 videos, one from each officer, that each run for the full 30 minute length of the standby mode recording, and a second version of the same 4 videos, which have been cropped to show only footage involving Mr. Brooks and the interactions between the officers and Mr. Brooks. Again, I encourage taking caution before viewing. I want to reiterate that we are investigating this case thoroughly and using every tool at our disposal to ensure that there is transparency and accountability for the events that preceded Mr. Brooks's death. I also want to make clear that this video and the conduct of these officers should not reflect poorly on the work and professionalism of the countless correction officers and correctional facility nurses throughout the state who go to work every day to protect and serve those in their care. And now we will play the 4 crop.
I commend her for making that statement, because it's important that people understand that this, again, as hard as this is a pill to swallow, that the overwhelming majority go to work and do the right thing. And this just makes the job that much harder when you have bad apples like this. Anthony, I want to go to you because I know you got a lot to say.
Yeah, so there's a couple of things. So obviously, there's going to be changes that are going to be made, and the people that are going to be affected by those generalized changes are going to be the people that do their job. So that's the one thing that I want people to realize. Use of force is obviously never pretty. There's tons of violations here, but these people here weren't working in any professional capacity. But the people that will now be affected by it are the professionals. Changes will start coming that eliminate discretionary empowerment. To be honest with you, corrections is extremely complex. I mean, you have to empower the officers so they can do their job and make decisions in real time. But what's going to happen is, because use of force tends to have a crazy amount of liability, the return response from the agency is going to be micromanaged efforts, and then also a more proactive response. So when you deal with a use of force that's known to us, so let's say it's use of force that's reported or use of force that followed through a code, especially with the body-worn cameras, each use of force should be reviewed by a committee. The committee should, at an initial level of the facility, should have some higher level custodial aspect, maybe the highest level of custody within that facility. You should get someone from administrative side and someone from the investigative side. And then there should be an initial review. They'll make their determinations of whether they agree the use of force is appropriate, inappropriate, or sometimes you could just have a policy violation. Doesn't mean it's excessive, but you could have a policy violation in which, questions the use of the force in general, or why was it applied, but doesn't mean that the use of force wasn't warranted, but maybe there's some concern with some policy violations that led to the use of force, or led to the maybe the inmate reacting in a negative way. But with that said, just going back to the incident here, this is a culture thing. I mean, these men knew or thought that the camera wasn't running, so this is something that probably is normal for them. And sadly for the RN, the RN is just caught up in the this group dynamic of what they feel is socially acceptable within that group. So I think the courage would come from just one person. I will guarantee you, if one person went in and made an effort to stop, then other people will go in. You kind of have that bystander effect. But there's another thing I want to mention too. Before the cameras came into play, a lot of the reviews of use of force were pretty much done by reports. You would read the report and then kind of look at the justification for the use of force, and then kind of be like, okay, it looks like, there's legit justification. The bruising is consistent with what they said. Looks like they used a baton, OC, whatnot. So you're usually good with it. Now, it's the reports are kind of secondary to the video. So the video, people kind of go to the video first and then look at the reports, and we look at the justification. So granted, if you had this inmate that, let's say there was no video and you didn't see all this, because most likely there wasn't a code here. So most likely someone had to snitch for someone to look at the video, or it could have been discovered on a video audit.
Well, I think, Anthony, I got to stop you there, because I think more than likely what happened here is because this inmate died in custody, a chief or somebody who runs that facility said, hey, I got to do a review on what happened that night. And in the process of that, because this wasn't just an inmate beating, this guy died. Ed, I want to go to you because you have done many of these investigations from the crime scene unit aspect. Will a state, from the state police, because we know they're involved in this investigation along with the attorney general, will a crime scene unit go into this facility and now start looking at this stuff and looking at back records? Of course, that has to do with the detectives and everyone doing investigations, looking at the histories of each and every one of these two sergeants and all of the correction officers and all of the personnel, and looking at their personnel file. What goes on, Ed, from the crime scene aspect as it pertains to this in custody inmate death?
Well, we're not going to do the background stuff, but we're going to go into that. We're going to go into that medical facility where the assault took place, and we're going to photograph, we're going to sketch. We're not going to take fingerprints or DNA or any of that stuff, because everything was captured on the videotape. The basic stuff we're going to do is, for grand jury, is the photographs of the location, the sketch of the location. And as for the physical evidence, it's probably all gone by now. If there was any bloodletting, it's probably all cleaned up and gone. But we know what happened here. There's no mystery. Yeah. Okay. There's no mystery. It's on these cameras. Okay. And, for those that are saying, hey, we don't know what it's like to be in, to work in a state prison. You're right. I don't know what it's like to work with a state prison, but I do know when a crime has been committed. As a law enforcement officer, I know I have that power, and they stepped over the line. I know where the line is, and I don't step over that line. They stopped being corrections officers when they crossed the line and assaulted this individual, and they became criminals. And for those who stood by and did nothing and didn't stop them, they became criminals as well. You can say all you want about, I don't know what it's like to work in there. You took that job, you were trained. You were given the rules, you know the difference between right and wrong, and you chose to do wrong. Well, what else is there to say? What else is there to say? There's no defending this. Anybody out here trying to defend this, you're out of your mind.
Yeah. Anyone that's trying to defend this is not on the right side. The bottom line is I've been in and out of MARCY Correction many, many times, and I've actually been, I don't know if it's that infirmary, but I've been in the infirmary part, because before we take inmates out and transport them back down to New York City, which is a pretty decent ride, it's 150 some odd miles back into Queens. When we would take inmates out of there, we'd get their medical records. And if the medical records were missing, my partner would stay, or I would stay with they call them convicts in the state. They would stay with the convict, and then state corrections would escort me or my partner to medical records, and if that was missing from their jacket, we couldn't transport them. So I have been in that. I probably have been in that room, or outside of that room. You see all those little windows where when it's daytime, that's where all of the prison records and all the medical records are there. So I've been in that facility. I mean, these state correction guys, I'm telling you, the inmates that I've taken out and driven back to New York, what they would say to me is, I can't wait to get to Rikers Island. And I'd be like, what? They're like, get me the hell out of here. This is a hellhole. And not just Marcy. I've been to, downstate. I've been to so many correctional facilities from the state side, and the inmates were actually happy to come and do their little stint that they have left over in New York City, because they're on the back end of it. So I've been in these facilities, and I'm telling you, the state guys, they weren't even nice to me. John, I don't know, if you've made any of those runs, but I always saw New York City Department of Correction buses outside these state facilities. And when we would go in there as a New York City police detective and not even a corrections officer, they were like, yo, boy, you wait over there. It's somebody like, I mean, I didn't get it all the time, but like 9 times out of 10, when I would go to these places, the inmates were afraid of the corrections officers. And to a certain extent, I know that's how they have to have that respect issue. Anthony, you talk about it in your books about inmate manipulation and stuff like that. But in this particular case, everything gets thrown out the window, because what these guys did was murder on video, and they didn't even realize it. I just want to play this one piece, because this is the Albany. He is the former Albany jail, which is a pretty decent sized jail. It's right outside the airport. Albany jail. I've made many pickups right outside the airport. And this guy, I actually know this guy. So I want to hear what he has to say, because I didn't even listen to this.
And actually, I'm horrified. I'm horrified that a group of professional correction officers in 2024 could act like that.
Albany County Sheriff Craig Apple says he has had to discipline members of his jail staff in the past, although nothing to the level of what Robert Brooks experienced at Marcy Correctional Facility.
Which is worse in your mind? That several people were involved in the beating, or that several others witnessed it and did nothing?
That is the more sad part. It's very disconcerting that you would have a sergeant. I clearly saw stripes in there, and I believe I saw a white shirt, which would usually indicate an officer, meaning a lieutenant or above. You're in violation of not only your oath of office, but where is the humanity? It's unbelievable that could happen with that. It's a gang. It was a gang.
Our initial reaction from the center was disturbed. And we just find what we saw irreprehensible and unexcusable on the part of the...
I don't know if you guys just saw that, but this is a sergeant right here. This inmate tapped him on the arm, right? I mean, this... inmate. Yeah. Well, he's going to be an inmate soon. Yeah. This correction officer actually taps him to say, hey, Sarge, get out of the way, because I'm about to give this guy a wallop. Watch this. Ed, I don't know if you caught that, but I heard you just say yes. Mm-hmm. Just keep an eye on this guy right here as I play this.
Irreprehensible and unexcusable on the part of the individuals that took part in this unfortunate.
And who's standing on the other side? Another white shirt sergeant. So you have one here, Sergeant Stripe, supervisor, and one here. So there's one on each side of this table that 3 officers are in. They have their foot in his groin, on his balls, on his private, and they're punching him. I mean, just to me is just...
One of the videos shows a correction officer that had about 5 or 6 hash marks on his sleeve. Now, in the NYPD, each one of these hash marks are 5 years.
Yeah.
All right. So you're talking about a senior veteran who could have retired if those numbers are correct. And he just pissed away his whole life.
And what we saw irreprehensible and unexcusable on the part of the individuals that took part and it's unfortunate.
Tayshawn Murdoch is the Director of Operations at Albany Center for Law and Justice. The unfortunate part of this story, as he sees it, is that what happened to Robert Brooks was not an isolated incident.
I think there's many incidences that we're not hearing about. We know from families who come into our office on a regular basis that they are aware of situations where their loved ones have also been abused and mistreated by corrections officers, only to have a deaf ear turned to them by the Department of Corrections.
Governor Kathy Hochul has called for the termination of 14 state employees, including corrections officers.
So that's the next part of this. This
Please.
conversation is these guys are now going to be brought up on charges. Ed, go ahead.
Folks, these are not cops. These are corrections officers. All right, just so you know. Okay, there's a difference between cops and corrections officers.
Yeah, they work as peace officers inside the Department of Corrections, and their jobs are not the same as what police do. They're not out there enforcing laws on the street. They're enforcing the administration's laws and codes inside the Department of Corrections.
Oh, wait a second on that.
They are.
That's so New Jersey. Yeah, so me and John are gonna have to argue that. So Jersey, we obviously we're not exercising, but in Jersey we are.
You're correctional police.
We are senior correctional. We're under law enforcement title.
What Ed was trying to say is they're not outside on the street.
No, we're not outside, but we are enforcing not just administrative laws.
You're enforcing the New York State penal laws.
The penal laws. We're forcing 2A, 4C.
Right, in your in your geographical area.
No different. What you guys might do municipality. We enforce state laws, and also correctional.
Your title is not police officer.
Well, no, Jersey, we are.
Jersey is
correctional police officers. It all depends. But with that said, we do enforce state laws, and we also, unfortunately, are more prone to use of force more than. I mean, we go through 20 uses of forces probably before an officer goes through one. I mean, we are. That's why it's upsetting here, because these are probably senior officers that went old school, unfortunately, which is something we never tolerate. We don't tolerate now. We don't tolerate then. And I wanted to mention something before you kind of, when I said the justification, I was talking about back in the day when you write a report, the only time you put why is when you justify your action. Most of the time it's specific facts, what, where, when, whatever, but you do have to put why when you justify your action. So let's say that this wasn't on video and administration was reviewing. Now, mind you guys, this is before video. This is just, we're going on the reports. The officers would probably say something like he tried to spit on me or whatever it is. They would do something to justify what would be an inmate that unfortunately looked like that. But thank God we have video now, because that eliminates a lot of the justifications that went blindly because all we had were reports. We do lean on the subjective interpretation of the need for force, the why behind the use of force. But with cameras, we look at the cameras first, and then we try to see how that camera relates to how is this person a threat to you? Because now if you look at the use of force documentation that now requires us to fill out, you got to go so far as filling out your size. There's so much criteria now because they want to be able to justify any use of force. And the biggest concern I have here is when people get, I'm not condoning this, but I do have to speak on the professionals that are going to have to deal with the aftermath, the changes that are going to come out impulsively because of immediate need for liability. The lady said he was handcuffed. Doesn't mean an inmate doesn't, not in this video, but hear me out. An inmate does pose a threat when they're handcuffed. My biggest concern is going to be, not in this video, but my biggest concerns are going to be is that they're going to jump and make changes to the use of force policy that's going to wind up hurting the professionals who have to do their job, because just as, these correctional, whatever, they were wrong 100%. But you got to be careful that you don't start putting changes in now that's going to affect the officers from doing their job, because you also have political agenda getting mixed in here now.
Well, that's what's going to end up happening. That's an automatic, because that's happened with New York City twice in my career. And again, by no means is anybody condoning what happened to this gentleman. No. By no means. As a person who's been involved in uses of force, no one is condoning that. But it's going to happen. They're going to change the status. They're going to change what happened. And
right.
It's
just to a lot of people. And again, Anthony, I agree. There's going to be it's politics comes into this. And, the governor doesn't have a clue of how to run the state as it stands. She's going to now come in and make suggestions for change that, like you said, nobody wants to see anybody get hurt that's going to their jobs on a regular basis and doing the right thing. If you start changing policies as it pertains to inmates and restraining and stuff like that, look, what I would like to see from this is some real hard changes in where the body cams or even fixed cameras in these facilities are monitoring, because we see it in the the county jails. There's cameras everywhere.
Yeah.
You know, some of them have cameras on the outside of the cells, so you could see the tiers, and they can go and look up and down into these pods. But I didn't see any of it. I looked for an hour at this video, and I looked at the ceilings, and I did not see one spot as they walked along that had anything remotely close to a camera. So if that's the case in these facilities, then these corrections officers know that there's no cameras, so they're free to do what they want. And with this situation that we saw here, they looked a little too comfortable for me to say, well, this was just the first isolated incident. How long has this been going on? How many years do these guys have on the job? Yes, they're all suspended. Here's a question. Are they all suspended now? I believe that they're suspended and some of them are fired, but there's probably a process, right?
Yeah.
They have to go through. John, do you know anything about that with the state?
Well, you would definitely get suspended. As far as the firing, if the governor puts, which she's saying she's putting down the law for the firing, I'm quite sure someone is going to be fired, because if the governor puts it down, you're going to get fired. But normally,
would the guy who's running that facility get transferred and get in trouble, Anthony?
Well, John, yeah, and we're also John. I want to comment because John's 100%. So, like management, once you're aware of something, now the liability happens. So it's best, to be honest with you, is to remove the officers with pay. Get them out away from inmate interaction, all that stuff. Remove them. You could pay them, and in case they win their case later on, hey, we're still good. But what I would do is, if I knew of this video, I'm going to look to remove them immediately, and then ultimately, as soon as I'm allowed, ladder mill them, because this could take years, for them to finally get sentenced and go through the process. So I don't want them walking around a facility until I get the investigation in my hands that says, there was nothing here, which we know there was. So universal precaution for management. Sometimes it's frustrating to the front line, and I get it. Right. But the universal precaution, if there's any concern with the trust and putting them back next to an inmate, is, let's remove them with pay. Just get them out of the facility, because they have rights too. The employees have rights too. And then at this point here, in this case here, because you got the video footage and there is evidence out there, I could remove them a lot quicker. I could probably set them out with pay for one day until I can get the paperwork together, and then work with the union to prepare their release. Which we call like a ladder mill, which will prepare their release.
Lori, who's been following this case closely, and I think I read they're suspended without pay.
That's what would happen in New York City. If that happened in New York City, you'd be suspended without pay. If you got brought back for any reason, you'd be rubber roomed, as they used to call it back in the day. You'd lose your shield.
They do it.
I know people it's happened to. So you'd have no shield, you have no gun, but you report to an area, and that's where you are. Probably at a half pay.
Yeah, this is Oneida County, correct?
Yes.
Yeah. Marcy is in Oneida County.
That's Oneida, right?
Yes.
Okay. So Oneida County correctional officers. These officers are sworn peace officers under New York State Criminal Procedure Law 2-10. State correctional facilities. Correctional officers at any state of New York correctional facility are designated as peace officers by the Commission of the Department of Corrections and Community Supervision.
Okay. Let's listen to the rest of this. Thanks, Ed, for that clarification.
Yeah, that's New York.
Investigation has been launched into a
fake. I mean, that's where this happened in New York. So that's why we're talking about that.
Body camera footage shows several officers hitting and kicking inmate Robert Brooke, who was handcuffed prior to his death. A warning for you, some details of this story may be disturbing. CBC's Albert Della Talla joins us now. Albert, give us the latest.
Mark, that body cam footage, it shows the final moments of Robert Brooks' life at that MARCY Correctional Facility in upstate New York on December 9th. We do have some of that video to show you, but we do pause it before it gets even more violent. So in that video, you see correctional officers there appearing to place a handcuffed Brooks on a medical examination table after he was transferred from another facility that day. The footage doesn't appear to show him doing anything to provoke that attack. So one officer in that video is seen wearing boots and appears to kick Brooks. Another officer then appears to yank him up by the neck and drops him on the table. Officers then remove his shirt and pants as he lies motionless and bloodied on his back there. Brooks was pronounced dead at a hospital the morning after that assault. Final results of the autopsy, they are pending, but preliminary findings show what they call concern for asphyxia due to compression of the neck as the cause of death. They also say the death was due to actions of another. New York Attorney General Letitia James, she called the actions seen in that video shocking and disturbing. Guilty to first-degree assault, have been serving a 12-year sentence after pleading guilty to first-degree assault in 2017, and that was for the stabbing of his former girlfriend. That ongoing investigation into Brooks' death could result in charges for any or all of the 14 prison staff believed to be involved.
And Albert, according to some critics, we're hearing this isn't it, right? They say this is part of a larger pattern.
Indeed. So we heard from one of those critics, the New York Civil Liberties Union. They said this is not an isolated incident. And they went on to say that rather it highlights a culture of violence and a lack of accountability for wrongdoing by corrections officers. And they went on to say that puts the lives of incarcerated New Yorkers at risk. I read a report on that prison released last year by a New York prison watchdog. It said that 70% of the inmates interviewed, they said that there is racial bias among.
All right, so that's the New York Civil Liberties Union. We're going to hear more about that, but I got to say this. Listen, I can tell you as a New York City police officer, I have the utmost respect for the men and women who do the job the right way in corrections. And John, you know that. Yeah. It's not an easy job. It's not a job that everybody wants to do or can do. I know many who have tried to be correction officers, and after a short period of time, they quit because they just can't hack it. So it takes a special kind of person to work to supervise some of the most violent criminals that are on the street that most civilians don't want to deal with. So we encounter them on the street as police officers, put them in handcuffs, lock them up, and then these guys right here, these two, and many others have to be inside 10, 12, 8, 15 hours, whatever the tour is. Sometimes it's 24 hours, and they are dealing with these guys. So it's not.
And they're outnumbered and they're unarmed.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. So, I get it. But see, now what these guys just did, just put all corrections officers in danger.
Out the window. They threw it out the window.
These inmates have access to the news. They saw these videos. They know what transpired. Okay. Now let's see what happens inside these prisons.
And the biggest worry we have now is, as I said, even when you got the ACLU coming in. So the problem is they're going to push a message now on top of whatever momentum is being created by this incident. And it's going to continue to paint the bad light. Now, what we have to do now is have venues like this where we have to push back, not in defense of what the officers have done. And I want people to realize that, because I love what happens is when we go to defend our position, people will then try to blend that defense as if we're defending the actions. No matter how many times you separate it, it's like, no, I'm not. But with that said, to say that, now there's racist bias coming up and all this other stuff where it's like, okay, well, here goes that momentum. It opens up the door. So the officers that did something wrong, they create the momentum in the wrong way, where now the rest of the professionals have to now deal with the hate, and then all of a sudden we lose lack of trust, not because we could have a perfect record, but unfortunately these 14 started something that now we have to defend what our professional practices were. And the funny thing is too, when it comes to the changes of the use of force, if they probably do create one. I see a lot of people talking about, well, the inmate was handcuffed. The inmate was handcuffed. And granted, in this video, that inmate was not a threat. We know that. But don't be blind and think that they are never a threat when someone's handcuffed. But in this case, I know this inmate wasn't. I separated it. But with that said, they can be. But the funny thing is when they talk about, oh, we got to revisit the use of force policy. Guys, the use of force policy works. These guys did not do anything that was related to the use of force policy.
They went against everything that is supposed to be done the right way. They did everything the wrong way. And what we're seeing here, and some people seeing this for the first time, is everything that you're not supposed to do.
Yeah.
And that any good correction officer or supervisor, that's the troubling part, is that this wasn't guys that were not supervised. There was 2 sergeants and maybe even a lieutenant there. I don't know the ranks in, how it goes. In city, it goes from sergeant to captain, but there was at least 2 or maybe 3 white shirt supervisors there. And 2 of them I was able to identify from the sergeant stripes. So these are what we're viewing here. And for all of us who support the good and who support law and order inside behind the walls and outside of the walls, you have to agree that this is, and we are agreeing, this is horrific. This makes my stomach turn. This is insane to see this in 2024 going into 2025. You would think that we could get this right, but it's not. There's room for improvement and things have to change. So John, anything, I want to go to the chat too. So I want to just leave it open for you, Anthony and John, if you want to add anything to this. But a hashtag Duty Ron, hashtag Ed, hashtag John, hashtag Anthony. If you have questions, now is the time for the chat, because we love our live chatters. And listen, I respect everyone's opinion as long as the opinion is said respectfully. We're not going to get it right all the time. This is a live show. It's unscripted. But what we can say is we're getting it right, that we come out and we denounce this type of behavior amongst any correctional professionals, amongst any police officers that do something like this. It's wrong. It's not what good people do. And we acknowledge that 100,000%. What happened to Mr. Robert Brooks is a sin. These guys should be locked up, and they'll have their day in court, but they should be locked up, go through the process. What they did was wrong. It's despicable. All right, hashtag Ed, hashtag Ron, hashtag Ant, just make it easy, Ant, instead of putting Anthony. Hashtag John. We like to take your questions. I'll leave it up to you 2 guys if you have anything to add to it.
You know, what's funny, John, we were, if I may, I thought this was unique. So obviously, you got a bunch of people watching the incident, not reacting. And I'll tell you something. I'm not saying people don't react because they're trying to protect corruption. That's not the case. Usually they don't react because of who they associate with more. So if you have senior officers or supervisors that kind of tell a new boot, this is kind of okay, the new boot could get caught up in that. And I know people like, no, if I was there, it's something different. Guys, it's what we see, something is obvious right in front of us, but that's without the social pressure that unfortunately forces people to conform. And sad enough, it really does take a courageous officer, especially even, let's add a little bit more courageous for someone that's new, to go against the grain and stop it. So you may find a newer officer may dry snitch or do something because they know what they didn't feel right, but sometimes they may not react. And it's not because they didn't want to, but for some reason, the pressure of the situation, they were more concerned about being a social outcast. And again, I'm not condoning it, but I'm trying to give people an understanding of the behavior. I don't know if John would agree with that, but.
Oh, no, I would agree with that, especially like you said, if, you're brand new and you're possibly fresh out of the academy and you're doing your first tour, jail, prison, it is what it is. And you could get yourself caught up in a situation and you may just freeze or stand there, or yes, hopefully you can be brave enough to possibly say something, but is it going to happen at that moment? Maybe not, because you're also not sure if you stop these people, then your locker room is going to end up in the shower full of bleach. It's just unfortunately, the way things are, yes, not retired that long, but, some things are the way they are. It's a very complicated job to work, as is law enforcement as a whole, whether you are on the streets, behind the wall. This makes it hard for everybody, because if I'm standing next to you, Ed, in the street, we're both you wouldn't be, you'd be in a suit, but we'd both be in a blue uniform, and they wouldn't know who we were, because not everybody looks at the orange or the yellow patch. They see two gentlemen in a uniform, and we're both going to get the same amount of hate, same amount of love, same amount of stuff thrown at us, just because that's how it is. And as everybody in this panel has said, no one is condoning this. No one is. It's excessive. It's crazy. And it is a smack to the people that have done the job. And for some of us are being retired, made it through 20 plus years or better. And it's a rough one, Is something going to happen when you're working? Yes. Is use of force going to happen that you're going to see between inmates, or yourself and you and an inmate are going to have use of force? Yes. I was a response team guy. My name is in a million reports because I showed up to the area that was in trouble. But it doesn't, you're getting a big lump sum. And like Anthony said, and like you guys have said, yes, policy change is going to happen. It's not the first time. It is definitely going to happen. And these gentlemen are going to be suspended and probably put up on charges. And it's going to happen to the next person that immediately has a use of force in the next couple of weeks. They are going to be slayed, whether it was a good use of force, justifiable use of force, or a crappy use of force. You are going to be raked over the coals. And it is only going to make the job harder, less desirable to take. And like Ed said, you're going to be understaffed without any kind of protection other than your OC and or taser. And even then, every state and facility is different. But it's just incredibly hard, and it's only going to get harder. No one goes to work to be a tough guy. Nobody goes to work to, hey, I'm going to, do this. Nobody does that. I go to work to support my family. I go to work because I wanted to be in law enforcement, and I wanted to, do something good and right. Things happen, yes, but, it's going to be hard. It's going to be hard now.
What happens typically in this is a knee-jerk reaction by politicians without giving the true consideration of the facts and what should be done, as opposed to the political expedient thing to do that with that knee-jerk reaction, because then all you're trying to do is show the community, look, hey, we're doing something. Well, are you doing something better, or are you making things worse?
Right.
Okay. So, you have to study these things. You have to understand where the failure was. And you could see the failure. You could see the failure. The failure was a failure of supervision. Okay. There were supervisors there. There were people, there were medical professionals, licensed medical professionals.
They just stood by.
Will lose their license now because of this. Okay.
Hey, Ed, let me ask.
Headstones and headlines. I'm sorry, Anthony. I just wanted to get to this because I promised people questions.
I saw
there's a lot of them. Headstones and headlines says, Duty Ron, do you feel that they should have been given the option to retire or resign if they answered questions or of the investigators? ? Because this what they were offered, none took it. They're going to be charged criminally. The attorney general is going to go after them. They're going to retain counsel. They're afforded they have to answer to their bosses of what operationally they did. But once it starts to go criminal and they're terminated, now they're no longer employed by New York State. They're now fired, and they're being brought up on potential criminal charges. They're going to retain counsel just like anybody else would. And then they don't have to answer the questions. They can answer the questions through their counsel. I know, Anthony, you're going to say something, but I'm going to answer the question because it was hashtag.
Well, no, I saw. That's what I was going to answer. There's a few questions. So one person said, "Why would they get paid?" So remember, guys, before you have the evidence.
What was the question?
Well, the one guy asked, like, why would they get paid after you see the video? So remember, when a removal process is not as simple as people think. The union protects. And there's rights when it comes to removal. And you have to make sure you don't violate those rights, because granted, they could still be charged criminally, but there's due process in how you remove somebody. Now, granted, the union also admitted that they're not condoning what these officers did, but they have to represent them and make sure that they're giving the fair due process. So if I'm administration,
Even after they're terminated, the union has to represent them.
well, to some level before the termination process, before the removal,
Yeah.
the
union will do it for departmental problem. Like you're going to get terminated, but before you get terminated, you're going to also be probably brought up on departmental charges. So
Yeah,
the union will take care of those.
Once
but once it goes finute, then you're going to get your own
because
counsel.
remember, you got the administrative, the civil, and then the criminal. Now,
exactly.
Yeah, if we're taught something out of, hey, we heard these officers did this, and I don't have the evidence right away, the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to remove them. I am, because I got God forbid information came my way and I didn't act on it, but I also have to protect the officers' rights until I get more information. So they are usually removed or, suspended from certain posts with inmate interaction. But for something like this, they would be removed at first, maybe with pay. It depends on how fast the video gets into the hands of the investigative authorities and back to the administrative side for the removal. But with that said, it could be paid first, and then you see the video, and then you push to remove them immediately. Or if the video came at the same time that they discovered the incident, then everything can move forward at once. I got the video. I saw the video. I'm removing them. I'm suspending them with no pay until we can kind of figure this out. So it's not that you want to give them pay, but you have to make sure you don't violate the rights of the individual in the process. That's what I wanted to answer, because someone said that you want to give them pay. It's not that you want to give them pay, but you got to make sure that you're acting on evidence. And if, God forbid, let's say, God forbid, even though we know in this case we weren't, but I acted and we were wrong, I didn't, no harm, no foul. They were being paid. All they had to do was call in every day, check in, and there's no harm, no foul. But in this case here, I believe when they were made aware, they got the video, and then they probably suspended them immediately without the pay, because there was enough evidence to do that. And then the union obviously would have been 100% supportive of that effort, but still did their due diligence until the person is removed from the facility.
I'm going to go out on a limb here and predict that in the next several days, within the next 3 or 4 days, you're going to see these correctional officers brought up on charges. They're going to be arrested, and that's my personal opinion. You can hold me to it. I would bet my pension on it that they will be arrested and brought up on charges, especially the ones that had their hands in there and doing the assaulting of Mr. Brooks. I could see that forthcoming. And Ed, you can correct me if I'm wrong. Any of you guys feel that I'm wrong, but I believe that should come swiftly, because you have it on video. The video doesn't lie. You see what's happening there, and there's nobody stopping it. But the ones that had their hands in it and that were delivering those blows and grabbing him by the neck, kicking him in the groin, punching him in the face, hitting him with his own shoe. And there was at one point, I didn't even show it, one of the correctional officers, the bald guy, was sticking a rag of some sort of something white in, trying to stick it in this inmate's mouth. And it just takes it to another level when you see that with that type of evidence and that type of video. I see that forthcoming.
And then there's another thing too, by the way. So if once they start going after the 14, they start separating them. I'm assuming I would go for the rookies first, because I think as an investigator, as long as you don't see the rookie directly doing it, the rookie would be a good pressure. You promise the rookie some safety, and basically resign. We'll work with you, because I want the senior staff. I want the supervisors. But here's what I want. I want what was said in that room. Were there orders given out? Did a supervisor give an order to that officer to do that? I mean, I'm going after the supervisors first to make, to kind of confirm what was said in that room. Who's the main person I want to come for outside of all the other ones? I want to know right off the bat, what was said in that room. Was this condoned? Was this an order that was given at that highest level of authority in that room? And I will tell you one thing, and John could agree, the highest level of authority in that room, whether they're involved or not, is the one running the scene. Yeah. That's why administration, we try to kind of let the officers respectfully do their job. We don't get involved unless we need to. But once that highest level of authority is on scene, that is the person that runs the thing. So if that was a lieutenant in there, they're going to get the highest level of responsibility only because they had the authority to stop it, and they didn't. So even if they weren't directly involved, they should get held to the highest level of consequence.
Yeah. Well, no matter how you slice it, this is a horrific act of violence perpetrated against Robert Brooks, 43, an inmate. Didn't make it into admissions to Marcy Correctional. He was being transferred there. He didn't quite make it, and they brought him out to a local hospital after this beating occurred, and he was brought to Wynn Hospital in Utica at 4 a.m. He was pronounced dead. I think that we can all, again, agree on this, that this is something that should never have happened. It's horrific that it did. Anytime you see something like this, and I think right back to George Floyd, it makes your stomach turn. It is a black eye for all correctional officers across the country, across the world, for that matter. It makes the job more difficult, but they need to be held accountable for their actions. And I know that everybody here on this panel agrees with this. There's so many people that are hot in the comments, and I completely and totally get it, because this is something that should make you outraged. If it doesn't, then there's something wrong with you. We're all outraged by it. We're disgusted by it. I know, Ed, there's going to be a lot more as it pertains to the investigation side. The state investigators, the Attorney General's office is investigating, state police are on it, and they're going to look at every action that these correctional officers, supervisors took in their entire career. They're going to go back and look at everything, look at all of the people who were injured under their watch, if there were more. And this isn't the last we're going to hear about it. So I want to thank our guest, Anthony from Tier Talk, Anthony Ganji. You are the best as it pertains to corrections. And John, you're, again, a brother from another mother, just like Anthony. You guys were always there, especially John, on a professional level. I worked with you.
Yes.
I lodged literally hundreds of inmates with you, and my guys, when they came in there, none of them had anything bad to say about us, because we let them smoke cigarettes when they wanted to, have a little snack, and we treated each other with respect and told good stories on the ride from upstate down into the city. And that's what and again, in the trip team, I felt like I was part of the corrections, because the guys who I picked up from other institutions, I had long rides with them. Sometimes on airplanes, we would take them, and we would land at LaGuardia, and we'd drive straight over to either Rikers Island, which was right there, or, come to the Bronx, to the barge, and see you. But that's the thing, is I treated everybody the way I wanted to be treated in the same situation. And don't get me wrong, I had some inmates that gave me a hard time, that, tried to get out of handcuffs or wanted to make phone calls. Hey, can I call my mom? Hey, can I call? No, it's a security thing. You can't make any phone calls, but I will certainly stop and get you a bag of chips. Or sometimes what we would do is bring them with us. We would bring snacks and goodies, and we would give them to them so we wouldn't have to stop. But if we ever did have to stop, like for arrest stops and to go to the bathroom, we never denied somebody to go to the bathroom. We would call the state troopers. They would meet us on the side of the roadway up on 95. The uniform would give us assistance. We'd walk them with the shackles into a rest stop, and we would let them go to the bathroom. So that's my encounters as it pertains to back and forth with the corrections. I saw the tough work that you guys and girls do behind the walls, and I had a ton of respect for you guys, and you the same for us. So that's why I really I wanted to reiterate that it's not.
Did he freeze?
He froze.
What happened?
We would do the right thing as it pertains to each other. But anyways, Ed, I want to give you final words and then go to our guests.
All right, folks. Thank you for sharing your time with us here. We've been a little over an hour and 22 minutes. I appreciate you spreading the word about us and becoming subscribers to our channel. But I say it always at the end of the show: stay safe, stay prepared, and watch your six.
Amen, brother. Anthony, over to you for final words in a condensed version, if you can.
Yeah, as always, guys, it's always an honor to be on. You guys are truly supportive of what we do. Ed, Duty, Ron, and then also John. Pleasure meeting you. I just wanted to thank everyone for their service, but also John, first time we met. So thank you for your 21 years or 22 years of dedicated service, and maybe one day you could venture over to Tier Talk and we could just shoot some shit. And did I say shit? I said shit.
That's fine.
Okay, good. And then, we could give some good senior advice to the rookies that need it, especially after a video like this. So I would love to have you on.
Anytime. Thank you.
John, final words from the New York City correction side.
Unfortunately, this, like everyone has said, it's horrible what has occurred. It puts a black eye on all law enforcement, especially corrections. I come from a family that has a member of law enforcement on every level, city, state, federal. It's an important thing to us, and it's a shame that this has occurred. Ron, Ed, thank you as always for extending the love to me. I love being with you guys. Love the chat. I love talking about the issues, and it was a pleasure to meet you. And hopefully, we will stay in touch and do something. But yeah, this was a real sin, and a lot's going to change. And those boys up north are going to really have some real trouble on their hands.
Amen.
Duly noted. They deserve it.
Hey, my final words, as I always like to say, is I send strength, prayers, and positive vibes to the victim, Robert Brooks, and his family. And if he had any children, I believe I saw a picture of him with a young boy. I don't know if that's his son, but I send the family strength, prayers, and positive vibes. And to all of the men and women that work behind the wall that are left behind in the fallout of these horrific, brutal beasts. These aren't what are indicative of our men and women in law enforcement. And I want to put up on the screen again. This is our victim. This is his family's left behind to mourn the loss of their loved one at the hands of unfortunately correctional officers in the New York State Correctional Facility, MARCY Corrections. Guys and girls, thank you for joining. On behalf of Crime Time with Duty Ron and Ed Wallace, we wish you guys a good evening. Happy New Year. Happy Hanukkah. Guys, safe, healthy, and Happy New Year. On behalf of our entire panel, we thank you for being here. Peace and love.